If I lost everything today, this is exactly how I would book 40 calls in the next 30 days. But this isn't just me being cocky, because I've actually done this for a few clients, including relay partners who we booked 42 calls in a single month. And it doesn't really stop there, because over the past 3 years, I've booked thousands of meetings across my entire client base, and I've built a process that almost any business can copy. But the reality is, most probably won't make it to the end of this video, which is why I'm fine with revealing my entire strategy and showing you how I'd build it from nothing. So the first thing I'd probably do is the most overlooked, but it's also the most important step. So if your calendar is empty right now, you may be completely skipping it. And that's why I'd focus the first few days on creating an offer that actually converts via cold traffic. Because without a solid foundation, the rest of the strategy completely falls apart. And the reality is the offer is what creates that foundation. And by offer, I don't mean like, the service or the deliverables or whatever it is that you give to your clients. I just mean how you present it to the market. So what I would do is this. First, I would identify a specific problem that your service solves. Then I'd develop a unique mechanism that sets you apart from everybody else. After that, I would establish quantifiable end results that the prospect can kind of envision if they decide to work with you. And at the same time, kind of setting a clear time frame from when they would see those results. And then last thing, I would wrap that all in a bow with a guarantee and a risk reversal that removes any sort of fear of making the wrong decision. Just makes it an easy yes. Now, in 2024, that would probably book you 40 calls in a month alone. But the reality is the market is sophisticating faster than I've ever seen before. So what we're doing for our clients right now to kind of combat this is creating front-end offers. And this is where most businesses get confused. So your main offer is kind of like your full solution, typically higher price, longer term commitment. You can think of it almost like a marriage. And the front end offer is actually more like a low risk entry point, something that's easy to say yes to, almost comparable like a first date. Essentially the goal with this is just helping the prospect know, like, and trust you before committing to anything larger. And if you really want to make sure your offer lands the first time, I'd recommend doing some market research. I'd leverage tools like ChatGPT o3 or Perplexity to go really deep on identifying the pain points that you're solving in either your front-end offer or your main offer. And truthfully, just discover a few unique ways to position it within the market. Because the reality is, like, you could have the exact same service delivery, the exact same offer, the exact same everything as, one of your competitors. But if you're able to position it in a way that the market's never really seen or heard of before, you're going to win that battle every single time. Now, you have your main offer, you have your front end offer, we've done our market research. Next, we need to test the offer. But before we can do that, we obviously need leads to test it with. So I'd spend the next 3 to 4 days actually finding and scraping leads. You see, most people think that they can get away with building an offer and then sending a few messages per day, throwing out some LinkedIn DMs, throwing out some Twitter DMs, whatever. But they have it completely wrong, because in my mind, you need to be sending at least 500 messages per day, reaching 500 net new prospects every single day in order to start seeing results. But even then, with like a really good offer, I'd say you only end up booking maybe 20 calls max. So if you really want to get to that 40 calls in 30 days level, I'd recommend doubling that. This ends up being 20,000 contacts per month and factors in some fairly modest KPIs like 2% reply rate, 20% positive reply rate, and a 50% meeting book rate. Now, those numbers can obviously be higher. We've run campaigns with 5, 6, 7, 8, even 10% reply rates, and then obviously the rest following. So if you want to generate leads on a done for you basis, book a call using the first link in the description and I'll talk to you soon. But I think these are a good start. And more importantly, here's how I'd go about finding those leads. So obviously you want to calculate your total. That is pretty much what we just did there. If we want to hit 40 calls with basic KPIs, we're looking at 20,000 leads per month. Next, you want to establish the database that we're going to be scraping those leads from. If you are more of a beginner, I'd recommend using something like Apollo, and then using either Export Apollo or Appify to pull leads from there. That's going to be your typical industry filters, with headcount, keywords, so on and so forth. If you're a little bit more advanced, I'd recommend going back to that market research phase and trying to determine a few niche related databases that are associated with your ideal customer profile. Essentially, you just want to find out where their information might lie. And honestly, with a few prompts, you can get really, really close to gold in some cases with those two platforms that I listed. So once you have that niche related database, I'd recommend using either like Instant Data Scraper, Appify, or something along those lines to go in and actually pull that information. So both cases, whether you go Apollo or whether you go to some niche specific database, you're going to have gaps in the data that you pull. You may have first name, last name, and company name. You may just have company name. You may just have company website, but obviously you need a lot more than that to run campaigns. So my recommendation here, pull it all into Clay in one spot and start enriching for each of the data points that you're missing. You can do this via waterfall. You can do this individually via any of the Clay integrations. But generally you just want to get a few key pieces. So obviously you want your decision maker data, first name, last name, job title. You want your email, LinkedIn for sure, company name, company website, and so on. And then everything else is kind of like the sugar on top. Once you have all of that established, you're going to want to verify your leads. Realistically, you could send without verifying, but the reality is that a lot of these leads that you found may no longer be working for the company that they're with. Things change, emails change. You want to ensure that the emails that you send are actually going to land in an active inbox to optimize deliverability and not crank up your bounce rate. So I'd recommend using a tool like Million Verifier. I've personally been using that ever since I started in the industry, and I've never had a single problem with it. There's obviously going to be tons of competitors out there, but if you're new, just start with that. It's the easiest way to go. After this, you could pretty well just get started from there. Like if you wanted, that's everything you need to launch a basic campaign. But if you really want to take it a step further, I'd recommend diving into some segmentation. So segmenting by job title, pain points, so on and so forth. Things that would realistically change the way that you speak to the person will make copywriting an absolute breeze. To be honest, it almost helps the copyright itself. So definitely look into that. Again, you can go back to that market research phase and really have it segment the types of people that you're reaching out to, which will make this process a lot easier. Now, once that's set, again, this is kind of icing, sugar on top, but I'd recommend going in and scoring your leads. And this is going to help with the multi-channel approach later on. So what you're going to want to do here, again, in clay.com or any similar platform, use a tool like Clayagent and keep it super simple. Everybody likes to complicate this, but you could literally just plug in a prompt that asks Clayagent to score each one of your leads on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 to 5, whatever it is you want to do, how closely that they meet your ICP. And then obviously you want to add details about your ideal customer profile in the prompt and just have it match the degree of relevance to that ICP. Then essentially what you're going to have is a list of however many prospects. Let's hope it's 20,000 because that's what we're aiming for. And they'll be ranked from 1 to 10. And you'll be able to prioritize those that are the closest fit to your ideal customer. Now, shout out to Nick Abraham for this one, but he also recommends kind of leveraging a sequencing strategy. So if you do score your prospects, basically order them from most relevant to least relevant. And then when you upload them into your email sequencer, essentially what it's going to do is start from top to bottom. Now, the reason why he suggests doing this is that the best fit leads are going to be those that are the most relevant, which therefore means they're likely going to resonate the most with your emails, and they're going to respond to you more than maybe someone who's less of a fit. By starting your campaign off on that sort of track where it sounds like something that people want to receive, you're getting tons of replies, conversations are going back and forth, it's going to improve the rest of your campaign going forward, especially when it gets to those that are perhaps like, fringe fits, maybe not the best, but could potentially be relevant later down the road. The idea is that if tons of people are responding to your emails, it's obviously something that people want to receive, and therefore you'll have better deliverability. And then lastly, I saved this one for the end because I don't really dabble in it too much, but personalization, if you really want to, you can use ChatGPT or anything along those lines to go in and pull different data points and personalize your email. I don't really use this too much, maybe a few little pieces of relevance here, but I find it increases the margin for error when it comes to emails, and people have an AI radar nowadays. So obviously avoid your cringy LinkedIn compliments. If you're going to use anything personalization wise, just, maybe talk about their ICP or one of their case studies or just little things like that. Don't get too crazy. Keep it simple. Simple scales is the way I always like to look at it. Now, that's the lead list building process, but the reality is that having all of these leads is really just the first step towards booking calls. Because if we want to test our offer the right way, we obviously need to build a system that can handle enough volume to do so. So essentially what I do is spend the next few days building a system that we need to start booking calls as soon as possible. Because obviously without it, you'll end up having to do everything manually, which truthfully will probably end with close to 0 meetings at the end of the month, which is fine if you're okay with that, but that's not the goal here. So what I would do is start with email first. The reason why I suggest building out your email infrastructure first is because it has a 2-week warm-up period. Now, if you don't know what a 2-week warm-up period is, essentially what it is you are going to be creating this infrastructure, and it's going to be sending emails back and forth within a warm-up pool to be able to build domain reputation and essentially just make the email look authentic, like it was going within an organization or something along those lines, just so it's not going completely cold with 0 reputation right off the bat. So without diving too much into it, that's that. We're going to build a series of lookalike domains. So, if your company is, let's use mine, for example, Growth Flare, I'm going to be using Try Growth Flare, Get Growth Flare, so on and so forth. The idea here being that we maintain brand consistency, but at the same time, we don't necessarily associate ourselves with the main domain's reputation, and we're able to isolate that perfectly. Getting a little bit more into the weeds, if we want to determine how big of an infrastructure we need to create, you're going to want to do backwards math from that number that we created before. So we determined that if we wanted to book 40 calls, we would need roughly 20,000 prospects. And if you want to reach 20,000 prospects per month, you're going to need to do roughly 1,000 sends per day on 20 business days. Usually I like to use 20. It's a nice round number, but there's going to be a few more or less depending on the month. Most email accounts can send roughly 10 emails per day. This is going to depend between Google and Outlook. They all have their own kind of preferences there, but keeping it simple, what that's going to look like is roughly 100 accounts required to get to that volume. So doing the math, if you want to set up 100 accounts, you have 1 domain per 2 accounts. That means you need 50 domains, and that would pretty much give you everything you need to reach 20,000 contacts one time in one 30-day period. Now, that's everything you need, but if you want to take it a step further, again, what we've been doing and what we've been seeing work the best for maintaining deliverability across time is batching inboxes. So if you need 100 inboxes to be able to hit that 20,000 mark, I'd actually recommend doubling that and going with 200. Infrastructure is getting so cheap nowadays that it realistically just makes sense to have accounts in reserve. So without diving in too far, obviously the strategy would be running your first campaign after the first 2 weeks of warm up on that first set of domains, and then the second month alternating with the second set. And the idea being that first set is active, second set is on warm up, and then they alternate every other month. This allows you to basically bolster the reputation of the domains that are warming. They end up getting almost like a 4-week warm-up period, which is double what most people do. And then honestly, nothing but good things can come from having a really solid reputation from those that are consistently warming. And then last thing, again, kind of like a sweetener, we add automations that kind of help us optimize deliverability. So we'll get notifications every time any of our emails drop below 1% reply rate. Usually we find this a pretty good metric to determine whether or not we're landing in the primary inbox. And then that allows us to either, do a swap or just like delete the inboxes, purchase new ones, so on and so forth, whatever your cup of tea is there. And then again, you're splitting those 50-50 across Google and Outlook. The idea there being that you're able to mitigate risk. The reality of this is that neither of these providers really want us sending cold outreach using their infrastructure. So they're going to be constantly, coming out with updates and different things like that to protect their end user. By creating 50% Google accounts and 50% Outlook, you're essentially protecting yourself from a situation where, one changes the game completely and makes it impossible to deliver, or the other and vice versa. Once you have those set up, purchased, you can essentially load them into your email sequencer. So I'd recommend if you're newer, either Smart Lead or Instantly, or if you're more advanced, this is what we use, is Email Bison. Won't get into the weeds too much there, but Email Bison, the idea is that it is an isolated infrastructure. So you do not share reputation with any of the other users on the platform, which is obviously a massive benefit. And there's a few other perks there too, if you want to look into it yourself. So that's email covered. Again, 2-week warm up. So now we're sitting on our hands waiting for that to get ready. Then what I'd recommend is diving into LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is going to be a lower volume platform, but I think there is still a lot of opportunity here. Even on the manual side, there's a lot of people out there coming up with strategies to, create dozens of different accounts and increase that sending volume. But the reality is that with the right messaging and the right conversations and truthfully just being a human, you can book a significant amount of calls just by following this process. So what I do first, optimize your profile. The way I like to look at this is almost like you're building a landing page on LinkedIn. So your heading is going to be, your headline, some sort of branding, social proof, logos from your clients. Obviously, your description is going to have a little bit about what you do, what you've done, so on and so forth. And then the rest is just kind of going to be littered social proof everywhere and everywhere. You need to prove your competence, prove your authority. Bonus if you're posting content that builds authority or overcomes objections. And then the last comment I'll make there is you want to make it really easy to take action. I see a lot of profiles where, it takes like 4 or 5 clicks to get to a website or a calendar or something on your LinkedIn. This needs to be easy. You need to make it really easy to click through to either book a call with you or go to your website and get more information. So keep that in mind. Once your profile is optimized, I would recommend setting up an automation tool like HeyReach. Now, most people use this for automated outreach. I would just use this for the connections. So you're going to take some of your higher quality prospects that came from that scoring process, probably your top, 25%, maybe even a little bit less, and load those up into HeyReach and just start sending automated connections. It doesn't have to be complicated. You can have it simply, engage with one of their pieces of content and send over the connection request, and then just kind of set and forget that. Once the connection is accepted, obviously you can jump into your DMs, and you're going to want to take a social first approach. You're going to want to be a human. Like, the reality is, like, LinkedIn is not the place for pitching unless you're taking those crazy volume based approaches. You want to establish a relationship here. So social first, engage. If you create that front end offer, leverage that as much as possible, but only really do so if you actually think that there's an opportunity for it to help them. Like, if you have a conversation with them and something comes up where, they mention a pain point that your front end offer solves, definitely throw it out there. Yeah, the idea is just supplements what we're doing with email. Realistically, we could hit that 40 calls with email alone, but adding LinkedIn and phone, which I'll touch on here in a second, are just a way to, guarantee that we get there and ensure that we hit that number. So that is LinkedIn in a nutshell. Again, small percentage of what we do, but definitely necessary and kind of adds that additional touch point when it comes to emails. There are a few ways, and I don't want to get too into the weeds, to kind of create a multi-channel sequence where, if someone responds positive to your email, you can connect with them on LinkedIn, so on and so forth, puts a face to the name. But definitely look into options like that, because I do believe they have pretty strong effects on the resonance and just like overall results. Last thing I want to talk about on the infrastructure is phone. So phone is a fairly new one for us, but we have seen some really, really, really good results, especially with warm calling. So what we do here is we have a clay enrichment. So every time we receive a positive response from email, we are enriching for the person's phone number. Mobile phone number data is expensive. So if you're just, ripping lists of phone data, you're going to spend a ton of money. If you do it this way, where you just set up the automation, so as soon as you receive a positive response, obviously you're enriching for less phone numbers and only the people that are actually interested in your offer. Then you kind of jump on the call, book the meeting right away, and just get to them the second that they're thinking about your solution and it's top of mind. The faster you can get to them, obviously, the better. The reason why I think this works so well is that it takes a ton of cojones to jump on the phone and call a bunch of random people, and most people just don't have the guts to do that sort of thing nowadays. So by doing this, you're setting yourself apart from the thousands of other people that are sending cold outreach and just leaving that email. And then kind of have a couple options when it comes to reaching out via phone. So if you want to keep it simple, use the dialer in your CRM. So like, I personally use close.com as a CRM, and we use the power dialer in there. And that works perfectly for warm calling and even cold calling in some cases. If you really want to take it to the next level and just rip through lists, check out something like Salesfinity. And that will allow you to kind of, you build your lead list at the very beginning, you enrich for the mobile data in the hundreds, if not thousands, and just push through those lists as fast as possible. Last thing you want to do is sit there manually on the phone, just waiting and waiting and waiting. And honestly, you probably won't have the majority of them pick up. Using a power dialer or something like Salesfinity allows you to do parallel dialing, which obviously gets you more connects and prevents you from, sitting there waiting for someone to actually pick up, which time is money. So that's a huge one. Now, I know that is a lot, but the infrastructure now should be ready to go. The leads are there. We kind of have our offer set up. We've done our market research. We've built our system. We've optimized our LinkedIn. The next thing we need is a process, because without a process in place, you'd be flying blind. So that's why the next thing I do is actually plan out and launch the way that you're going to implement all of this, which really should only take 24 hours, maybe not even that much, to be honest. But funny enough, most people skip this part. They get a little too excited, spam all of their leads in a single day, ruin their deliverability, and obviously that's not fun and not sustainable in any way. So you need to kind of set a schedule to avoid, one, landing in spam, and two, just getting the best results possible. This is a war of attrition. So obviously you want to stay in the game for as long as possible and have this be something that you can just consistently recur and iterate and build on. So this is how I structure my day. First, I leverage the morning, probably from 5 to 9 a.m. to execute any sort of creative campaign work. So this is where I'm jumping into work before things get noisy. I'll write or rework cold email copy, refine hooks, CTAs, positioning, tone, create new offers, front-end offers, so on and so forth. I'll dive into Clay, come up with creative campaign ideas, plan experiments, tests, ultimately just using this time to ideate and, you just start the day getting everything from the previous day out of the way. Next, 9 a.m. hits. Generally, people are just getting into the office. They haven't necessarily started their meetings. Things are a little slow. This is where I'd start your LinkedIn sort of blitz, so to speak. Send a bunch of manual connections to those A-tier prospects, engage with a lot of their posts to stay top of mind. Don't leverage anything generic. Obviously everything you want to add to their post should be value driven. It should show your competence. The idea is you're stealing eyeballs away from them and you're making yourself top of mind. And then on top of that, you're going to be sending your manual DMs. So anybody who you connected with previously, you can send, warm message, social first, no pitch, start a real conversation, build relationships. I can't stress that enough. That is where the magic happens. It may not be fast, but this is where you get your referrals. This is where you get, general connections that turn into partnerships that go on forever. And again, only introduce your offer if you actually think it naturally fits into the exchange, if that makes sense. Next, afternoon is upon us. You've had your, mid-afternoon nap, throw out a couple coffees down. 2 p.m. roughly, as I'd say, when you'd want to start this. Start grabbing the phone. Take calls during this period because it has been proven to be a high answer window. People get tired in the office, they're slowing down. They're not necessarily working as hard. They're not as distracted. They're willing to pick up an answer. Use openers that sound natural and honestly optimize for the pattern interrupt, so to speak. You don't want to sound like you're pitching somebody. Focus on value-led discovery. And again, no hard pitching bullshit. Then leave voicemails that tie into your offer or the other outbound touch points. The reality is this is a multi-channel ecosystem. We want each one of our strategies to build off of each other. We don't want this siloed approach where we're just kind of taking 3 different, attacks at a person without combining them in a given way. And then obviously throughout the day, you're going to be responding to replies that come in from campaigns. This needs to be done within 5 minutes max. You have to maximize speed to lead. And we do this in a few ways. We set up Slack alerts so that we know immediately when a response comes in. And then we leverage some other inbox management tools that allow us to kind of stay on top of things and be fast. We'll always have all of our resources ready to go to respond within minutes, sales assets that are relevant for all of the different ideal customers that we're reaching out to, or the profiles that is. And then we also have pre-written templates for common scenarios. Now, obviously we don't want to be robotic and we don't want to just send templated responses to everybody, but having different pre-written scenarios for things that you get all the time gives you kind of a foundation to build off of, if that makes sense. Then lastly, evening comes around. You're going to want to review your performance across all channels. Ensure that your reply rates for the email campaigns are above 2%. Ensure that positive reply rates are above 20%. And then obviously you want to check that you're on pace to hit that 1,000 contacts per day. If you want to book 40 calls in 30 days, you have 20 business days to reach 1,000 contacts every single day. if you fall behind, there is no catching up. You can't just crank up the volume on your infrastructure and send more on a day to make up for it, because you're just going to cook your domains. So it's super important to make sure that you're actually maximizing the volume that you have allotted from your inboxes on a day-to-day basis. Then obviously you're going to want to look at these metrics, determine where the weaknesses are, and create a to-do list for the next morning. So if there's a campaign that needs to be redone, if there's more leads that need to be added, if any of those metrics aren't where they need to be, make a note while it's still fresh and create a to-do for the next day. So I know that was a lot, but by now you have everything set up. And the thing is, at this point, that's where most people stop. Yes, the dirty work's out of the way, but this is like the most important part of the entire process, because without leveraging this, you're not really going to be maxing out your results. So with that being said, what I would do is spend the rest of my time testing and refining my offer. You see, most people stop at the launch, but the people who get the best results are the ones who continue to improve their offer based on the data they're getting from the market. The best thing about being like in the weeds, so to speak, is you're actually there. You have your ear to the wall, listening to the market and getting responses and objections and everything that you're then able to bake into, repositioning and, retargeting and different things like that. So what I would do, analyze which angles are getting the most traction, identify patterns and objections and hesitations, and then ultimately just double down on messaging that resonates. Because we've seen this across countless situations. Maybe our market research told us that reducing operational efficiencies was the angle that we were supposed to take, but turns out after receiving hundreds of responses, that growing revenue is all the market actually cares about. And it's kind of funny because oftentimes tweaks as small as that, just like the one pain point that you're leading with, can lead to double the response rates. And with double response rates, obviously that trickles down to your other more important metrics. So next, you need to focus on making it easy for prospects to book and converting those interested prospects into scheduled calls. So what we do in this situation is we suggest multiple times for the meeting, and then we also provide our Calendly link so that they're able to book a call on their own time. On top of that, you're going to want to use confirmation sequences and stuff like that, because the reality is like people don't always take action right away. And again, if you go back to the warm calling on this, like you're going to book those meetings 8 times out of 10 if you call them right away. So the only thing on top of that, clearly communicate the value that they're going to be getting in the call. If you're leveraging a front-end offer in this situation, that obviously makes it really, really easy, because they know kind of what they're getting out of the entire engagement. The whole front-end offer is based on that. So reiterate that, just make it obvious that they're getting something really solid out of this, and kind of just take it from there. Obviously, after that, you kind of want to follow up with non-responders. So the beauty of this entire approach is that you're building this ecosystem of people that are interested in your offer to some degree or another. So this is an ever-growing asset. This is something that you will have forever, and you can leverage in a ton of different ways. So create sequences that nurture these prospects, test new offers on them. Maybe they weren't resonating with your core offer, but they'll resonate with a new intro offer. And also just go multi-channel. If you have a bunch of prospects that were perhaps interested at one point, maybe they fell off on email, hit them up on LinkedIn, give them a call. Like you have all of this information at your disposal. There's no reason not to take advantage of that and just do whatever you can to ensure that you get that meeting. Because the reality is, you validated that they have a problem. You validated that you are able to solve that problem. In the end, it's in both of your best interests to move things forward. Sometimes people just buy in their own time, and you really need to work these leads. So that's what we leverage there in this last step. Obviously, some flows that we use, pre-call nurture, reminder sequences, stuff to prevent no-shows, and things like that. And then the sales call is a whole nother beast, which I'm sure we can talk about another time, but that is everything that I would do if I had to start from zero. So even if you have no way to generate leads as of now, you should probably be able to get pretty far just by following this video. But there are obviously a lot of tiny steps in that process that I couldn't cover, like setting up inboxes, copywriting strategies, maintaining deliverabilities, and those pre-call flows and stuff like that that I had mentioned, to make sure that these leads actually turn into customers at the end of the day. And that's exactly what we help our clients with at Growth Flare. Just like A. Newman and Associates, who we helped book 32 calls in 30 days. Stroud Inc., who we helped book 24 calls and close 3 high-ticket deals in the first 30 days. and the list goes on. So if you want to generate leads on a done for you basis, book a call using the first link in the description, and I'll talk to you soon.